yeah, so I was walking back to work and I had to stop at the corner and wait for a white car to go past, and I noticed something down in the gutter, and I picked it up and it was this tiny little blue marble and I was like, oh gosh, someone's got a sense of humour. I just sort of smiled all the way back to work and thought, oh well, just going to have to roll with it. And
it says inspected by LM. That's my initials. Sitting right next to where the marble was. So the universe has an amazing sense of humor. So you've got 20 of them. I've got my 4. They're all blue. I don't know what is going on, but I would almost bet money that I will never find another blue marble again. Guest today is Anna Hunter, who reached out to me with a super cool story about synchronicity. And although she lives in New Zealand and I live in America, we have connected and we're coming together today. And I'm going to let Anna share her very inspirational story. So welcome, Anna. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's
so
a pleasure.
Excited you're here. So why don't you go ahead and tell us your story of synchronicity?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So a few years back, 2011, actually 2010, I decided that it was time to try and start a family, and Sean agreed. Of course, we've got to have two participants there. But we tried to get pregnant for about a year or so, and then visited the doctor. And the doctor said, oh, okay, I think we might just refer you to the fertility clinic and also book you in for an operation to see what's going on there inside, if there's anything stopping you getting pregnant. And so I ended up having an operation and everything looked okay. So no endometriosis or pelvic inflammatory disease or polycystics or anything like that. But the blue dye that they tried to put through my fallopian tubes just did not go through at all.
Hysterosalpingogram.
Yeah, so they woke me up from the operation and said, oh, look, there's a completely blocked, but it's not the end of the road, you could try IVF sort of thing. But I've been kind of resistant to trying IVF because I just imagined that if you were going to have a baby, then it would just happen, if you were supposed to have a child, then you would get pregnant So I was like, I don't know about that. But anyway, so a couple of weeks after this operation, and I sort of hadn't processed the fact that I was infertile, and so I didn't really know how I felt about it. I hadn't had a cry or anything like that, but I was watching TV one night. I turned it over to CSI, very end of CSI, and they were talking about how Grism had given Sarah like a blue marble and said, oh, what do you do when life hands you a blue marble? And I was sort of waiting for this, cool answer and stuff, and they said, you roll with it. And I was like, oh, cheesy. Really was like, So that was on a Tuesday night, and then on Thursday at lunchtime, I went for a walk down to our lakefront, sat under a tree for my lunch break, just sort of contemplating, the next moves and what was going to become of us, sort of thing, and my plans to have children. And so I was walking back to work and I had to stop at the corner and wait for a white car to go past, and I noticed something down in the gutter, and I picked it up and it was this tiny little blue marble and I was like, oh gosh, someone's got a sense of humour, haven't they? I just sort of smiled all the way back to work and tapped it up on the top of my monitor and thought, oh well, just going to have to roll with it, and really didn't think much of it again. I had ended up on the list for IVF, but it was 18 months long. So in New Zealand, all healthcare is all paid for, which is great, but you've got to wait your turn. So 18-month waiting list. And then they called me up like a year early and said, do you want to start IVF next month? So I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, so pretty much every step of that process, which is quite involved, like injecting yourself for a month and doing this and extracting eggs and putting them back and all that sort of thing. I just thought, if it's meant to be, then it will be. And I kind of think that's why it worked in the end, because there was only like 3 eggs that they managed to get. One of them just didn't fertilise at all, and then the next one went abnormal and within a couple of hours of being put together. And then the third one was my daughter Gracie Jane Hunter, so who's now 9.5. So yeah, so that was that story. But there's a little bit more, because ever since she was about 1, she's been giving me, just handing me marbles, saying, well, here, mum, and so I always say, oh, first of all, to be honest, I was like, oh my gosh, am I pregnant again? And she's only like just started walking. So I was a bit of like, sort of thing. But yeah, they just kept coming and kept coming. And yeah, so she didn't really know until she was 7 what significance those marbles had, because I didn't think she would understand. And, until she was a bit older. And I sort of wanted it to be like impromptu, like, just keep giving me these marbles and not knowing why she was giving them to me. But when she gave me the 10th marble was when I decided to tell her the story, the day before she nearly drowned. So her and her 2 friends, or sisters, so it was Gracie was 7, Bailey was 7, and Leah was 4. And they were at the beach, and there was a bit of a high tide coming like right up the steep sort of slope of the beach, and my husband and Bailey and Leah's dad were pulling in a long line. I don't know if we call them contikis here. We send out like a unit with like 25 hooks behind it, 2 k's out, and then you leave it there for an hour and wind it in. And so they were like busy doing that. The kids were just playing up to their about thighs in the water. But all of a sudden, this massive wave came along and just knocked them all off their feet and just swept them out to sea. And they didn't know that had happened, but they started hearing like yelling and stuff and thought the kids were just mucking around in that, but they were actually, well above their head and sort of dunking under the water. And Leah, the 4-year-old, she couldn't swim, so she was holding on to Gracie's hair and pulling up and down in the water. And in the end, Bailey and Gracie decided, we're going to try and lift Leah out of the water, but keep ourselves out. So they would, anyway, they got rescued, thank goodness. But and it was a very myself and Bailey and Leah's mum were not there. I had to come back to go to work for the day. Trudy was at a Elton John concert. So we'd got to ride that, together. We were heading down to the beach when this was all happening. And so when we got there, we discovered that, this close call and stuff, and a very restless night, going, holy crap, what could have happened, sort of thing. But the next day when we got back home, we had some earthworks done because we were building a new shed. So they had to dig out all the stuff and then fill it with all this gravel and stuff. And Gracie was standing down next to me. I was telling the neighbour what happened, and then she just reached down and pulled up this marble and said, oh, here, mum. And I sort of struck me that she just about wasn't here to give it to me. So I decided that was the moment to tell her about the marbles. And since then, she's given me another, 10 actually, but one belonged to the neighbour. So we gave it back. Yeah, so I've collected them all. They're all,
Wow.
yeah, all different shapes and sizes and colours and all that sort of thing. I don't
That's
know how well
so cool.
yeah. So this little one here,
Yeah.
that's the first one that I found in the gutter, and this was the one that she picked up out of the gravel. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Anna, all right. So Anna reached out to me because you saw me on an interview that I did on Jeff Mara's podcast. And I talk a lot about just my out-of-body experiences and my synchronicities with my passed away loved one, Mark. And so when Anna sent her story to me, it really touched me for more than one reason. So I'll share something also very personal. It took me 3.5 years to get pregnant. And I was lucky enough not to have to go as far as having to have in vitro fertilization, but I do have friends who have had to go through that. But for me, it seemed like every time I would get my period, I would sob, I would break down. If I were working, I would have to leave the field where I was selling and I would have to go home. And my husband was really having a difficult time because there was nothing he could do to console me. And I just felt like such a failure. Like everybody's supposed to be able to get pregnant. And I was young. I was in my, my early 20s, early to mid 20s. And I remember like it was such a very difficult time. It seemed like everybody else around you is getting pregnant when you want to get pregnant. And you would see somebody who was really young, pregnant, and it would just tear me apart. And I really, my heart went out to you around that, but how comforting to get something as a synchronicity that just has been a consistent synchronicity even after that. And I think that your story is one also of hope, because I think sometimes when we can find something outside of ourselves to hold on to, that's hopeful, it can change the outlook. And sometimes it's just a little tweak of energy that brings things back to us in a certain way. So I think it's a two-part thing. It's one, being able to recognize the synchronicity, but two, also being able to change your mindset and opening yourself up to hope. So I was excited to talk to Anna, and I set up an interview with her for January the 14th. And Anna had never done anything on Zoom, had a difficult time, and canceled it. And I thought, well, okay. I wasn't mad or upset about it. I just kind of looked at it as, well, the timing is not right. Little did I know that I was about to become a big part of your blue marble story. So I personally, in my entire life, have never found a marble. I have a connection to marbles, though, because my great grandfather kept a jar of marbles. And when I was a little girl, when we would go to his farmhouse, if it was raining, there was nothing to do. This was about the only game we could play. We'd play marbles. And so I did not get those marbles when he died. And I love marbles. So if I had ever found one, I would remember finding one, and I never have. So our interview was supposed to be on January 14th. And on January the 28th, I went on my normal mountain climb. I live in Arizona, and I regularly climb an 1,100-foot mountain. So this is not an easy climb. This is 1.1 miles, 1,100 feet. It's rated as a 4. It's a hard on the All Trails app. And so this is not something that just everybody does. But I personally have climbed this mountain probably 900 times in the last 6 years. So on that particular day, I was by myself with my dog Storm, and we got it to the top. And when I go to the top, I sit in the same spot every time. So I've sat there 900 times. And that day I looked down and I saw this piece of blue. And I also have a blue backpack. And my backpack had ripped, and I thought, oh gosh, darn it, I ripped it again. And a piece of my fabric is falling apart, and I'm gonna have to replace this backpack I love. And I reached down to pick up this fabric, and it wasn't fabric. It was this little blue marble. And I was really surprised. And that was on the 28th of January. And I reached out to you about a week later, and I said, Anna, I found a blue marble. I think we're supposed to talk. And why don't you tell me what you wrote back about your prayer?
Yeah, sure. So on the 17th of December, I was going for a walk in the forest, and I was a little bit down about something that had happened to do with Gracie. She had, after being completely healthy her entire life, not even any allergies or asthma or anything like that, had all of a sudden developed some like tics, like some extra movements and things like that. So I was sort of kind of feeling real down, like I know that everything else is somehow worked out and there's all these miracles have happened in my life, but I thought, well, what if this is different? You know, what if this ends up real bad and sort of like catastrophizing about her future and all this sort of thing. And then I sort of trying to snap myself out of it because I'm like, oh, I never used to think like this, you know, no, I'm not having it sort of thing. And I'm like, oh, well, I know there's no such thing as time and space. So I'm asking for a blue marble within the next 3 weeks. And yeah, specifically blue. So I've never actually asked for a marble before because Gracie has been constantly giving me marbles, 19 of them or 20, since she was 1. So I just never felt that I needed to. But this time I was like, hey, if everything's going to be all right, I want a blue marble and I want it within the next 3 weeks. I know there's no such thing as time and space, but my logical mind says, okay, 3 weeks sort of thing. So I get back to the car, which was about 5 to 10 minutes from where I asked for the marble. And I opened my phone because I don't take it with me. And my friend Trudy had sent me a picture of a marble and said, oh, look what just fell on me from the rafters of the garage. She was getting one of those clear storage containers down from up in the ceiling of the garage of the rafters. And it must have been on top of this storage container, and yeah, just fell on her. And obviously she knows that I like marbles and stuff, so she thought to message me, and I sort of said, oh, that's pretty uncanny because I just finished asking for one about 10 minutes ago. And she goes, I literally found it and then messaged you straight away. So the timing was, you know, within the 10 minutes of. So she said, oh, well, maybe it was for you. And I was sort of thinking, well, I didn't specifically ask for a physical marble, did I? Like, you know, I was thinking of a physical marble, but I didn't actually ask for a physical marble. So a photo of a marble was good enough for me. So I was like, oh, that's, you know, my sign that everything's going to be okay and I'm just going to have to roll with it. But then later, a couple of weeks later, just after Christmas, actually, my friend Therese was messaging me and she went backwards and forwards for a while. And then she said, oh, I found a blue marble in the redwoods the other day on the path. And I thought of you and Gracie. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me, right? And then I sent her all the screenshots of me and Trudy talking about the marble and with the date on it and everything. And she said, oh, it was the 30th of December is the date that I found it. So 2 weeks after I'd asked at that point. And she said, it's up on my mantelpiece waiting for you to come get it, sort of thing. Sent me a picture. And then the next one was you emailing me. I was just like, oh, crikey, this is getting quite crazy.
Yeah, and the synchronicity for me was I knew about your story. I knew that our interview hadn't been able to work out, but I've climbed that mountain 900 times. I sit in the exact same spot. In all the times I've climbed it, I've never found one. So I found that marble, and then that was on the 28th of January. And then on the 16th of February, I climbed it again. I'm not going to believe this. It looked like another piece of fabric on the ground, and it is actually another blue marble. I swear to God, I can't make this up. And this time I looked down and I could see the marble. It was on top of it wasn't buried in like that first one. And I could see it. And that was marble number 2 in the exact same place they had found the first one. I had hiked it since then. So it was all of a sudden just there. And now I have begun telling people about this. I told my friend that I hike with every day, Stacy, about it. So that was on the 16th of February. And on the 17th of February, Stacy and I hiked this mountain together, and she had gotten sick with COVID. And so she didn't feel like she could hike as fast. So she hiked up ahead of me and had to wait for me about 10 minutes at the top. And she was sitting up there for 10 minutes in our spot. And I walked up and I looked down, and it looked like, again, that piece of fabric was going to be in the ground. And I looked, and it was a third blue marble.
Really? Gosh.
Yes. And that was a few days, that was like a little, the 17th, today is the 24th of February. So today we and it's what was really also odd about that day. I told her about the story and she had already been up there, and I was actually going to say to her, I'm going to like be so surprised if I find a blue marble today. And I was totally going to say it to her, just joking around. That thought was in my mind when I looked down and saw that marble. So that was crazy. But then I have to share what happened this morning.
Okay.
So this morning we climbed Black Mountain together and we walked up there, and I went up there, but my intention was different. This was the first time my intention was there's going to be a blue marble up there. And my friend Stacy almost fell off the mountain when I found a fourth one. So I have found 4 of them. And I also want to share that when I found the third one, there was also a paper sticker. Now this is at the top of the mountain. It's a little piece of paper, and I'm going to see if you can see what it says here. Hold on a second. Doesn't want to focus. Hold on.
You might have to read that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to read it. It says inspected by LM. That's my initials. It's sitting right next to where the marble was. So the universe has an amazing sense of humor. So you got your 20 of them. I've got my 4. They're all blue. I don't know what is going on, but I would almost bet money that I will never find another blue marble again. Because I just think it was so specific to what we were doing. And I feel like I know less than I know. I mean, there's more that I don't know than I do know, but I know that when the universe wants to get our attention, they will find a way to get our attention. But what a crazy synchronicity that has happened and has just become a part of my life as well.
Yeah, well, after you emailed me, I went to see my sister, and that was like the 13th of February for her birthday over in Tauranga. And I told her about the 3 marbles so far, and and also my niece, Shani, as well. And then on the Friday, she sent me a photo of a blue marble outside a skin clinic and said,
Come
"Oh,
on.
look what I just found."
Okay,
And
can I hear from anybody in the audience? If you guys have found a marble, and especially if you find one after watching this video, you have to come back and put a comment down below, because this is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, so she'd been on like what was going to be a half an hour walk, only lunch break. So she'd headed off, walked back, and she discovered she had 4 minutes left before her break finished. So she decided to carry on work and go in the other direction. And that's when, in that 4 minutes, she found a marble outside the skin clinic. Yeah, so I was like, oh, well, this is getting a bit crazy. But during the week, I visited, so Jason, the guy that I was going out with that died in 1996, his sister. So I called her my sister-in-law, but yeah, technically she isn't. But I went to drop my daughter off at her place because she didn't want to come for a walk with the dog with me. And she said that a guy at Palmer's Garden Centre walked up to his son Eli, who was 6, and said, "Oh, would you like to look after this little plant for, to keep, basically?" And handed him this little succulent with a blue marble in the container. So
what do you think what does this mean to you? What does this do for you? What does this mean to you?
Well, definitely the sense of humour bit, because the feeling I got when I found that first marble in the gutter after I'd rolled my eyes and gone, "Oh, how cheesy, you just have to roll with it." But I never asked for a marble, but I got one anyway. And the message is, you just have to roll with it, as cheesy as you think that is. And now I'm getting told to roll with it. I don't know. Yeah, I really don't know.
Does it bring you comfort?
Yes, a lot of comfort that everything happens for a reason, and whatever Gracie is facing at the moment and will face with her is happening for a reason. And it's something I absolutely believe and know since having that near-death experience, like, the dream, that was very much like a near-death experience way back in 2006.
Yeah, and I would like to hear that. Do you mind telling us that story?
No, I don't mind at all.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.